Hmm. Sure.
I think it worked when I exported it. So now.
It is approved by the FDA to treat mood disorders and anxiety disorders, such as major depression disorder, bipolar depression, panic disorder, OCD, bulimia nervosa, and PMDD. It may take several weeks before results are seen, depending on the patient. Fluoxetine active mechanism is found in brain cells. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that communicates with neurons. It is synthesized and released from presynaptic vesicles. It gives red dots here and contact neural levels, and it flows throughout the synapse until it either reaches a serotonin receptor or is reuptake through transporter. If it reaches a serotonin receptor, it becomes deactivated by metabolism enzymes such as monoamine oxidase and then reuptake transporter. Fluoxetine works by binding to this reuptake transporter, but serotonin is no longer flowing. This is an image of fluoxetine found in serotonin reuptake transporter. In the first image, hydrophobic interactions are shown, and in the second image, they are not. This is just so you can see a comparison of how many hydrophobic interactions there are, and that it is the main thing binding the fluoxetine into the reuptake transporter. This is how serotonin fluoxetine binds to reuptake inhibitors, causes lesions, functions, and no longer fluoxetine
Now this is
Pretty good.
okay.
You to improve it, you can tell a story. Somebody, somehow, but I'm fine with. I mean, that would make it better. But you have all the biochemistry there.
Like total.
I think without insurance, there's like a test now that it's $175.
That's not as bad as the
One of my friends' insurance agent, she was. Yeah.
I assume
No, my friend. They have like a deductible they have to pay. So
yeah, I don't know. She just said it was like almost 300
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start since we have. Well, it's. The topic is pretty long today because I ran over because I talked too much on things I like to talk about. So we're going to talk more about vaccines and more about antibodies today. As a review from yesterday, just to kind of get things rolling, we have two parts of the immune system: the innate immune system, which is very rapid response, very generic. We have macrophages, natural killer cells, dendritic cells, neutrophils, so on and so forth. We didn't really go into that. That's really not the important part of it. Although it will come up when you take immunology, and there are times, for instance, asthma, where it's important, but from a biochemistry perspective, those are not necessarily important. We do have kind of an overlap with T cells and natural killer T cells that mainly in this cytotoxic T cell is what we're talking about here, that are also part of the innate immune system, and then as well as the adaptive immune system. And B cells that produce antibodies, and then T cells, helper T cells and cytotoxic T cells are part of the adaptive. And we'll actually talk, I'm going to talk today about CAR T therapy, which is an emerging cancer therapeutic strategy. I've heard a lot about it, but I haven't really done research much behind it. I'll be really interested to see how it affects you guys, because what they do is they take your T cells out and they genetically modify them and they put them back in, and then that's what they use to attack cancer. And so I'll be really curious to see if you guys are able to administer that as a. Have you heard anything? So I'll be really curious to see if you guys can administer. It's not going to add on today about infusions, which antibodies are infusions. And I know you guys can administer vaccines. And he said you can get in a residency program, whatever you guys call it, the equivalence. Is that what they call it? Residency program? So in residency programs, you guys can get to administer the infusions, which are all the antibody-based drugs. So you guys can administer those if you go through a residency program. So it'll be interesting to see if you guys can do the CAR T therapy. I'd be really curious to see. We'll talk about that here in a minute. All right, so we have three types of abnormal immune function, and this really, really does come into play for you guys. These are malfunctions that can produce effects that range from minor inconveniences to severe morbidity and even fatality. First and foremost, I talked yesterday about allergic responses. That's in fact, anaphylactic shock would be an extreme example of that. And just as a general reminder, we'll talk about IgEs a little bit, but antibodies and isotypes IgE will induce a mast cell to give out a whole bunch of granules that are filled with histamine and other inflammatory agents. And that goes systemic, and that causes significant problems, anaphylaxis. How many of you guys are familiar with histamine and drugs against histamine? What drugs do we have against histamine? Benadryl. And for some weird reason that I still find very fascinating, Benadryl knocked me out. If I take Benadryl, forget about it.
I can tell you why.
Great, I'd love to know why.
It crosses the blood-brain
Okay.
barrier, and then it interacts in the brain. Whereas other antihistamines that have a similar effect as Benadryl can't cross the blood-brain barrier, which is why they don't make you go.
That's a generic reason. But I will
It's
know.
biochemicals.
It's not quite that much.
Well, let's see. Okay, so what concept did we talk about yesterday that drastically affects blood-brain barrier penetration? You guys remember we started with it yesterday. And remember we started with showing the picture of the skin, and why does the skin work as a barrier? The first line of defense. There are, but there's one specifically that we talked about that makes your skin very hard to penetrate. What Cornelius? Yeah, that it's part of it. It's a specific type of junction.
Oh, tight.
Yep, tight junctions. So tight junctions make it so that things don't penetrate through your skin. Remember that really fancy biochemistry that Ben was talking about with the interaction of proteins, and then we moved into looking at the gut, and we talked about the ciliated gut, and what kind of molecules were those that the cilia were like? They looked like hair, but what molecules were they? Are they lipids? Carbohydrates, right. So, proteoglycans, right? That makes things mucousy. It also improves your tight junctions. So you have tight junctions in your gut. Have any of you guys heard of leaky gut syndrome? Probably some of you have. They think that leaky gut syndrome leads to a lot of inflammation with obesity because your microbiome gets basically gets off. So the tight junctions are not as tight, and things will leak out through your gut. And so that is supposed to lead to this general inflammatory response for obesity. Well, in the blood-brain barrier, you have tight junctions. The biochemistry behind them is very, very similar, and it prevents certain drugs from crossing the blood-brain barrier, and it allows other ones to penetrate through. And a lot of it is based on the size of the molecule. This is why it's so hard to treat brain cancer, because those molecules those chemotherapeutics that treat cancer are not very easy to go through tight junctions, and I think that's probably there's your biochemistry.
Yeah, but I agree that's the biochemistry, and that's fascinating, and I love that topic. But I'm curious why. What does the Benadryl interact that equates to being drowsy?
I don't remember. I'll look that up. It's a
Great.
receptor.
Oh, it is? Okay, great.
I'll look it up.
Cool. I actually am curious now. All right. So there's 4 different types of hypersensitivity reactions. We have type 1, which is IgE-mediated hypersensitivity. So that's a degranulation event. That's what we just talked about. So mast cells basically give out all the histamine. This is where you see systemic anaphylaxis. You can see localized anaphylaxis. So if you, things like hay fever, hives, food allergies, eczema, that's a degranulation of antihistamine. So if you take an antihistamine, that's associated with this kind of event. Type 2 is IgG-mediated cytotoxic hypersensitivity, and this is where you get the ADCC event, where we talked about yesterday. where antibodies are directed against a cell surface antigen, and that leads to ADCC. This is where you see blood transfusion reactions, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, which is a really, really bad thing. That's where your blood vessels or our red blood cells burst, and so you end up with an anemic event. We have type 3, which is immune complex mediated hypersensitivity, and this is where you get antigen antibody complex. Actually, I shouldn't go into this much detail because I have different slides on this, but this is this is an immune-related complex mediated hypersensitivity. And then we have a cell-mediated hypersensitivity where we have activated macrophages that release different cytokines, and you'll see this with contact dermatitis, tubercular lesions, and when you have transplant rejections. So that's the type 4 hypersensitivity, and we'll talk about all of these different ones. So type 1 is obviously an allergic reaction. It happens within minutes, and you have to be previously sensitized. So you have to be previously exposed to something, and then IgEs are created, and then the next time you see it, you're going to have, again, this is the 12th time you've probably seen it, it's this mast cell release, and you get an antihistamine. So this is the difference between this and a normal immune response is that we get an IgE antibody related, and then you're going to see that histamine. This is where you get inflammation, and inflammation is good or bad? Both, thank you. Type 2, this is where we're going to get, again, ADCC. So we have, in particular, this happens with different blood groups. So if you give the wrong blood type, this is where you're going to see this kind of a situation where you have the different blood groups. This is A, B, and O. And if you give the wrong blood type to somebody, you're going to cause an anemic reaction. So this is a drug-induced hemolytic anemia, or another type of an immune system-related hemolytic anemia. And so that's basically what ends up happening. You have serum antibodies that are produced against the different antigens because they're seen as foreign, and you end up with a type 2 effect. Type 3, so this is again an immune type response, and this happens generally across. This is like another house episode, right, where you have your Rh factor in the first pregnancy. You have an Rh antigen in the first pregnancy that's exposed, and in the second one you get an immune response to that. So the first one goes just fine, and then the second one you actually develop antibodies against that Rh factor, and from there IgEs, and then so your immune system will start to attack the placenta and the fetus, and that causes erythroblastosis fetalis, which basically means killing the baby by attacking those cells. So that's an example of a immune-mediated type 2 hypersensitivity. Sorry, that was type 2. Sorry, type 3 is an immune complex. Sorry, so I messed that up. So this one's the third type. This is where we have an immune system complex in complement. So these C3bs are an immune complex. That's the complement activation. And those are going to form. What did complement do from yesterday? What does complement do? So what are these things here? We have the green are the antigen. We have C3b proteins, and then we have these Y-shaped molecules. What are those? Antibodies. Yep. So we form a complement activation. We're again going to form mast cells. That are going to release histamine. But then from here we get neutrophils that are going to come in, and from there we get these immune complexes in the form of the bloodstream, and you end up with all kinds of other immune complexes and significant inflammation events. So these can occur because of bacterial spores, fungi, dried fecal proteins, all sorts of other parasites. So, and you get serum sickness. So this sometimes occurs when you have a vaccination. Type 4, this is a delayed hypersensitivity. This is This one's poison oak, poison ivy type are good examples of this one, right? So you get local recruitment of your monocytes and macrophages, and you end up with contact dermatitis. So you expose the poison oak antigen at your skin, and then you end up with macrophages being recruited and monocytes, and they create a severe localized inflammation event. So those are the 4 types. The next one that we're going to talk about is an autoimmune disease. These diseases have significantly increased over the past 20 or 30 years. Some of that's because we're living longer. But you can see that every organ system in the body has some sort of autoimmune dysfunction. Multiple sclerosis is basically attacking the myelin sheaths, right? So you end up with the inability of the neurons to fire correctly. You end up with thyroid diseases, which are significantly increasing. Graves' disease, that affects all kinds of different animals. I know we have a friend who has a dog who has Graves' disease. In bones, you have rheumatoid arthritis. Muscles, muscular dystrophy, and fibromyalgia. Skin, you have psoriasis, vertigo, eczema, scleroderma, and lungs, you have fibromyalgia. These are probably all diseases I don't know all these diseases, right? Like I don't know fibromyalgia, but you hear about it all the time, right? These are diseases that are up and coming, and you'll see them. Peripheral neuropathy, diabetic neuropathy, GI tract, celiac, Crohn's, diabetes type 1, that's a GI tract. Those are all GI tract and associated with autoimmune dysfunction. Blood, leukemia, hemolytic glycemia. So you get all kinds of diseases that are malfunction of the immune system. These are what these diseases are a failure of tolerance. So tolerance is the ability to recognize self and not attack yourself. Right? So your immune system goes, oh, that's me, I shouldn't attack me. Which is really important, right? Because what is your immune system designed to do? Yeah, and kill things, right? It's designed to protect you and kill things that enter your body, or mitigate at least the effects. So if they're attacking you, which is what you see in all these diseases, you get disease state. So those are the general. A classic example is lupus, so SLE. I can't tell you how many times I've heard about SLE in the past little bit, because it's one of those diseases that has definitely increased, and we have really no good solution for it. And the worst part is it's systemic, meaning you're going to see it in all parts of your body, all the way from skin, heart, you have severe abdominal pain, blood, muscle and joint. It was also one of those things that's in the house a lot.
It's never lupus.
It's never.
They check for it every time. It's never lupus.
But you can see, the problem is that it's very difficult to diagnose, right? And that it can have very different degrees of severity. And so sometimes you can have it and not be able to easily diagnose it.
So you're just born with it?
No, actually, so it's an autoimmune disease, and over time, your immune system recognizes and starts to attack cells within your body. So your immune system attacks your healthy cells. So it's something you develop. Actually,
What makes someone get it?
It's a great question. I don't know if we fully know the answer to that question. I'll tell you things like, you want to talk about rheumatoid arthritis? Are you up for that? Or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
So with rheumatoid arthritis, that's where you get, there's different causes, but some of the major causes would be like your joints become inflamed a lot because of damage, and then your immune system recognizes that it needs to be there to fix it. If you have something like reactive oxygen species there, it can damage some of the proteins, and that your immune system, they'll recognize that it's not self. They're damaged self proteins, right? So then all of a sudden your body goes, oh, I need to develop antibodies. Well, not only will your antibody attack the damaged, but it also can then attack the healthy stuff. Then you end up with inflammation of the joints and stuff. So when we're treating like rheumatoid arthritis, we're treating with an anti-inflammatory. We're not really treating, we're just decreasing the ability of the immune system to attack. That's not something you're born with. That's something like if you're running every day, or playing football or soccer or something, or you're not eating a healthy diet and you have high inflammation around. If you look angry.
No, I was just thinking, so there are multiple different kinds of arthritis. There are some that have inflammation, like rheumatoid arthritis, and you can have juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So it's something that you develop over time, and you can have traumatically induced rheumatoid arthritis. But recently there's been reported to be a genetic component to it, to rheumatoid arthritis. And then you have osteoarthritis, which is a lot of times what the majority of people have is osteoarthritis. Those are like your overuse type injuries. Those are the ones that you see people's knees and backs typically. A lot of it is associated with obesity. And so you have, but that is not considered an inflammatory arthritis. That is an overuse arthritis, which has a different pathology. So.
You're talking about osteoarthritis. Yeah. So things that they say, high caloric diets, cosmetics, trichloroethane, stress, depression, fatigue, estrogen, low levels of DHEA, drug-induced. So different things can cause this effect. Again, we have, that's the last slide of the immune dysfunction. There's a lot of, we probably could spend an entire semester talking about those immune dysfunctions. And I think it's just important to note you're going to see these a lot. So if we just take diabetes, for instance, that's caused because of your immune system attacks your Langerhans cells, and then you can't produce insulin. So there's all kinds of effects from a non-functioning immune system. So this is kind of the balance that we talked about yesterday. It's neither good nor bad, right? It's good, and what we want is a balance. We want optimal effectiveness. If we have overreaction, we can have allergies as external threats, or we can have autoimmune problems as an internal threats. If we have an underreaction of the immune system, right, we can get cancers, we can get infectious diseases like hepatitis, HIV, shingles, TB. These are related to cancer, so all of these can also be influenced by cancer. We can also get infections from viruses, bacteria, fungi, and parasites too. So all of those things, if we have an underreaction, and this is what's always in-house, right? In-house, you always have, do I do this or do I do this, or which? Because it's always a steroids versus antibiotics type thing. So this is this balance of your immune system attacking versus being over attacking versus under attacking. We want kind of a balanced effect for optimal performance. So we have several other factors. So we have primary immune deficiencies that come from parents. So there's things like disease-carrying genes. So children born with IgA deficiencies or SCID, those are double babies. You probably heard about double babies. Or other primary immune deficiencies. Those are primary immune deficiencies. We also have secondary, which are intravenous. Their secondary causes, things like drug abuse, unsafe sexual activity, malnutrition, chronic diseases, development of AIDS leads to secondary immune deficiencies, or you can have impaired or weakened immune response. So there's a primary and a secondary, and that just lets you understand the cause, right? So that you can treat it more effectively. So primary, this is a chart of stem cells that go to different types of immune cells. So you have neutrophils, monocytes, B and T cells. If you have a deficiency in lymphoid progenitors, you can get SCIDs, and this is where you have no adaptive immune system, basically. These are the bubble babies. If they ever get exposed, they're in trouble. Then you have different types of, you have X-linked alpha gamma globulinemia. So there's different places where these diseases can occur. That's the primary immunodeficiencies. There's a genetic. This kind of gives an idea of what kind of diseases you can have. This is really bad. When I blow it up, it'd be this bad. But these are some of the primary, and they're not overly common because, frankly, if you don't have a good immune system, it's like if you have a metabolic disorder, right? They're not very. You don't have good fitness, so you're not going to make it to the next generation. So.
Ben, do you know how many of those disorders are single gene causes versus multiple?
I don't know the answer to that question. It's a good question.
Do you guys know what I mean by single gene causes versus multiple gene causes? How many traits do you think you have that are controlled by one single gene? Very few. I don't know the actual, but there's very few traits that you have that are caused by one single gene, which is part of the problem and part of the struggle with the gene therapies that we talked about earlier, right? Because if you have a single gene cause, usually we can fix that. Like with DM, when we looked at the SOD1, we could fix that. But for a lot of these immune diseases, there are multiple genes, and so they don't know. Like I was just reading about lupus because it got me thinking about your question actually. What causes lupus? And there's 5 risk factors that they say, and there's like whether you're male or female, what race you are. If there's a genetic component to it, they say we know there's a genetic component, but we can't identify a single gene, which means there's probably multiple different things that are contributing. And so I think you see that a lot with some of these primary immunodeficiencies. We have a lot of repetitive pathways specifically for immune system things because, as been said, if you don't have a good immune system, you're dead usually. So I just think it's an interesting question.
It is a good question. So here's some secondary immune deficiency issues that you'll see. Diabetes, cancer, autoimmune. All right, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're talking about antibodies, a little bit more structure related because these are some of the drugs that we've talked a lot about actually small molecule drugs, and I think we've touched base on a few antibody-based drugs here and there. Today we're going to dive in and talk about the whole. And yesterday I introduced you to concepts, mainly so that today, as we do a deep dive on things, you would have a frame of reference, and maybe you could, your brain could start to put connections together overnight. So that when I introduce it today, you'd have a little bit better idea. So as a review, we have 2 main components of an antibody. We have the FAB region, and there's 2 of those. That's this upper part here. There are the branches in the Y. And then we have the FC region. That's this lower part here. There's a variable region on each end. You'll notice it's VL and VH, and VH and VL. Those are variable regions. And then we also have constant regions in the FAB region. And there's a CL, that's labeled CL and CH. The FAB is all constant, and all of this is put together by disulfide bonds. So you have each molecule, and they're all linked together and stabilized by these disulfide bonds. And then we also have phosphorylation events that are put in here, and there's all kinds of different FC regions, constant regions that exist that affect what we call the effector function. So things that the antibody can do, or the events that they can cause, that's associated with the FC region. Again, so we can have precipitation, we can have agglutination, or we link a bunch of cells together. We can have just straight up neutralization, so it just blocks the ability of a virus to do something. From there, we also can cause inflammation, right? So an inflammation event can be triggered. So this, so the antigen is bound to this antibody. This is a mast cell. The mast cell binds. We can release histamine and other events. This is what kind of antibody would that be? What kind of antibody mediates release of histamine? That's type. You're right. It is type 1. Which antibody is associated with type 1 hypersensitivity? IgG, IgM, IgD, IgA, IgE. E. I like the guess though. E is almost everything else. So if you guess E on the test, you're more than likely gonna.
Is G more for, what's G used in? IgG?
We'll go into that.
Okay.
We'll go into that. So this is related to IgG or IgE, and that's going to be opsonized or phagocytosed. We also have complement, which will result in cell lysis, and all of these mitigate the danger. So we'll go now. We're going to go into all these. I introduced this yesterday. Again, there's 5 different classes. IgM. This is the first response to an antigen. It's effective in creating a glutination. What's a glutination? What does it look like on the previous slide? What was that? Basically, what happens is because there's so many antibodies that are attached, it's going to cause aggregates to form, huge blocks of protein. So that's what an agglutination is. It can't cross the placenta, but this huge block is going to be there, so you're going to have all these different attachments. IgG is the most common form. It crosses blood vessels, and it also crosses the placenta. It's the most common, and it's also the one that we make drugs out of. This right here is the main source of our drugs, and it's the main source of antibodies that attack the majority of bacteria, viruses, and other microbes in your body. Not all microbes, but most microbes. IgA is secreted from mucous membranes, and so it prevents the attachment of bacteria to epithelial cells, and it's also in colostrum. That's colostrum. Yep, you're right, go. It's the first one. I know you're thinking, you're right. So say it. It's the first milk that's produced, right? It's got a different consistency than the later milk, but that's the colostrum is where IgAs are secreted. Or IgAs are found in that colostrum. IgEs, we've talked a lot about IgEs. They cause an inflammation reaction, and they're going to cause. They're also they kind of have a bad rap because they do good, right? But if they're out of control, they're the ones that cause all kinds of problems with allergies and typed hypersensitivities. IgDs, we don't really know what they do per se. We actually identified them in 1964. And there's certain bacteria that they do a very effective job of taking care of, but we still don't really know exactly. They're a very, very small percentage, but we still don't know exactly what they do. Here's the different ways that they're found. I think we showed this yesterday. I'm going to go into a little more detail. IgGs are a monomer, okay, and they have this structure here. IgAs are a dimer. In between, we have a J chain. We'll talk about that in a little bit. IgD, love it. No one really knows. IgM, this is the first wave, right? And you see that this is a pentamer. Sometimes it's shown in a hexamer. It does not have high affinity, but because there's so many of them, it has high avidity. And because there's so many of the high avidity means you're going to get increased attachment. It's put together so all of these FC regions bind together, and then there's this J chain here, and we'll talk about what the J, just note there's a J chain here, and a J chain with the IgAs, and we'll talk about that first, or in a little bit. This one is the first to be released, and it comes after the CD4 helpers. And then IgE is also a monomer, and we'll talk about that here a little bit as well. We can switch between antibodies, the types. So this is called isotype switching, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to chunk off and switch the isotypes. 75% of serum antibodies are IgGs. And again, I'll mention those are the main type that we make drugs out of. So IgMs are the most common in the first wave, and then we isotype switch, and all future antibodies are generically IgGs. That are, I should say, most of them that are IgGs. IgGs have 4 subclasses, and the main difference between them are the hinge regions. So IgG1s, which most drugs are actually IgG1s. IgG2s have a different hinge region, the smaller or a larger hinge region. IgG3s, and we'll talk about what the differences are, have a very large hinge region, and IgG4s have a specific hinge region. There's clinical differences. The main differences is the hinge structure, and that provides it with flexibility and stability. So they have different abilities to respond based on that hinge region, and that hinge region allows different cells to attach due to the flexibility. As a note on therapeutics, which affect you guys, when we're making antibodies to anything, we want them to be IgGs, just so you're aware. That kind of makes sense, right? Because IgGs are the most common in your blood. We don't know what IgDs do. In fact, most of the time we can't even get them purified. IgMs have low affinity. We rarely want low affinity antibodies. IgAs, we rarely purify, and what am I missing? And IgEs obviously they have the wrong effector. They have the wrong FC region, so we don't want that. So, of the 43 licensed, this is a little bit old, but 20 are for cancer, 11 are for autoimmune diseases, 4 are transplant, 6 other, and 2 are for infectious diseases. 40 are full-length antibodies, 3 are FAB fragments. We'll talk about what those are in a little bit. 29 are IgG1s, 2 are IgG2s, 4 are IgG4s, and 1's a humanized IgG2-4, which is basically there's some murine and there's some rat antibodies in there. So some of the old ones, like Humira, some of the other ones are actually not humanized. So we have 3 murine antibodies, 7 chimeric. What does chimeric mean? Does anyone know what a chimera is? It means they're from 2 different species, right? So we actually took and
If I take Latin in here, see, this is the problem.
So chimera comes from 2 different hosts, generally like mouse, human, rat, mouse, rat, human. So there are 7 antibodies that are chimeric. 16 are humanized. What does that mean? You don't know? No, it actually means that they were made in a mouse, and then they took out and they humanized them. They put them in human. What would be the difference between a mouse antibody and a human antibody?
That is a difference, yes.
So mice do make IgGs just like we do. Their sequences are a little bit different. If their sequences are different, what does that mean? What is that going to mean? It can, right? Because then your body's going to view that as what? It's going to view it as foreign. There's no maybe about it. It's going to view it as foreign, and so it'll attack that, right? So this is what's caused. This is so some people get fusion reactions, right? So and some people have what's called antibody effects, because we're taking these big foreign molecules and we're putting them in people, and sometimes they're mouse, sometimes they're chimeras, sometimes they're humanized, and sometimes they're straight up from human, but sometimes that's not a good thing, because your body's going to view that as foreign. We have 3 antibody fragments, and then I told you we have 1 bispecific that's approved, and I didn't know that, so that was kind of cool.
What's bispecific?
It has, so in the antibody structure, it has one of the FABs is different than the other one. Yeah. So Gary and I just made it a bispecific. 1 to GD and one to GB on herpes. And it actually showed synergistic effects.
Why would you want a bispecific?
We're talking about this yesterday, but go ahead.
Oh.
No, it's good. No, it's good. It's good that I hear it
Why do
again.
you want a bispecific? Because maybe you never know what kind of extra credit questions are coming up.
Well, that's something about that it doesn't last very long, so it helps.
Sure. I mean, that'd be an example of what you could do, right? So bispecific, if I wanted to, like, so what I just told Amanda, we designed a bispecific for glycoprotein D and glycoprotein B of the herpes virus, right? So it gives it a double dose, right? I don't have to put 2 molecules in. I put 1 in, and sometimes it can have a really bad effect, right? So we designed a bispecific that would attach to GH and GL and GB. Well, that made the fusion stronger, right? So it actually brought them together and made it so it worked better. Yes. So it was a bad thing, right? So bispecifics aren't always a good thing. This is so the genetic. I'm not okay. This is way over my head. Okay, I'm just going to tell you this straight up. How we make the variable region is a genetic phenomenon, and it's done through somatic class switching recombination. Okay. I want you to think about how this works, right? So antibodies have 10 to the 9th or 10 to the 11th number of clones that are made. That means they're all different. How would you make over, what is 10 to the 9th? Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a lot, right? It's a lot of zeros after that. There's that many cells in your body that make unique antibodies. It has to be done genetically. What do we know about the genetic code?
How many bases are there?
Does that mean we have 10,000 genes that make antibodies? Or 10 to the 9th genes that make antibodies? No, we don't. We don't have that many genes, right? We only have like 20,000 genes, right? So we have this recombination events that occur at specific sites. Again, way beyond my genetic. I just know it's crazy. So you get recombination events that occur that allow, and there's these VJD region or VGJ regions that allow the different small sequences to form different alignments, and that's how you get your variability. So they recombine in different ways, and you get variability that way. That is just freaking amazing to me that your body can actually do that. I don't know, and you get class switching in there as well. So it's all of these things are. Oh, this is it too. Complementary. You can also get somatic recombination. All of these things can switch and change, and it's ridiculous. So you can get class switching recombinantly, and you can get CDR that switch recombinantly, and you get all these different things that affect. So if I could get an IgG with variable regions that are different, all these different things can happen, and they're highly mutated too, meaning the events are not very accurate, and that gives the ability of these cells to have a lot more variability as well. One day I'm going to do that justice and try to understand it, but frankly I don't care at this point. It's way too complicated for me. How that actually happens and who actually figured out that that's what happens is just freaking amazing. You have anything to throw in on that?
I was thinking this is similar to CRISPR.
It could be. I don't even know enough to say it to make an educated comment on that. Hopefully,
I could tell you how this happens, but
I think
that's
if
a
you.
discussion for another day.
It's not really important. I think it's just important. I'm just introducing you to the concept, and I think when Glenn teaches the class, if you're interested in this, because frankly, it is an absolutely astoundingly fabulous.
It's really cool. You're using an error-prone polymerase.
Yeah.
Usually
Well, that's.
you don't want error.
But you also have recombination events that are occurring just in specific regions.
Using that VGA.
Yeah. BDJ, yes. Okay, we talked a little bit about effector functions. We talked about receptors. So effector function is how your body deals with the antibody that attaches to the antigen. And your antibody has different Fc regions. So each one of these, there's an FC gamma R1, R3, R2B, R3, FC alpha R, FC epsilon R1. There's just different effector regions, and all of these are in different antibody classes. So they're differentially expressed, and the signal associated with them dictate how the body deals with them. So that's the differences. So this effector functions, those FC gamma regions, are in the FC region of this antibody. Okay, and each one of these has different FC regions. Each one. I like the thought process. The reason you need transfusion, the general reason you need transfusions all the time is because, let's just take something like, are you talking about infusions or transfusions?
What's the difference?
I know what an infusion is. I don't know what a transfusion to me would be coming from somebody else, right?
What?
I don't know. It's a good question. Maybe we should figure that out. So these generally you're going to have. So generally when you talk about like an infusion, let's just talk about infusion first, right? So transfusion for me, and I could be way off. I'm speculating here, so I'm just telling you straight up because I don't know. But there are people. So you guys all give. How many of you guys give plasma?
Anybody donate blood?
You guys don't really? These are students, right?
Pay for that.
I mean, when we were students, we did that all the time, right? We give blood, sit in the machine, they spin down your.
I could barely give blood for the department to do my test. Oh.
Well, so what they do is they just so when they take your blood, when you donate blood, right? They take the whole thing, and they're really after the whole thing. No, they're not after the plasma. They're after the whole thing. When you give plasma, they're actually after the plasma. The plasma is basically antibodies. So that'd be a transfusion in my book, right? Transfusion. You're actually taking antibodies from somebody. You give it to someone who has severely compromised immune system. There are people who have severely compromised immune systems. When you go donate plasma, they're giving to people, and then you're helping them fight off whatever. Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad we validated by Google. So that would be a transfusion. The reason they have to do that is because someone with SCIDS then could actually function because they're using my plasma, which is all of my antibodies and white blood cells. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm a biochemist, not a
I'm sure it
clinician.
depends on how frequently they have to do it.
But if you're going to take like TNF alpha, let's say you have celiac disease or not celiac disease, Crohn's disease, and you're going to do a TNF alpha inhibitor, right? And they're going to give you an infusion. That's where you're going to go in. You're going to take Humira, right? Humira is a bad example because you can give that with a cancer. Whatever. Let's just assume that you're going to do it by infusion. That's going to go directly in your bloodstream, right? The antibodies are going to go directly in your bloodstream. And the reason you have to do that is because your immune system is constantly going to be trying to attack, right? It's constantly going to be trying to. So what you're doing is you're just constantly knocking out TNF alpha. You just have to do it all the time because your immune system is going to do that.
You also have to think about half-life. and
That's
rate-
true.
and rate of elimination, which you guys will learn a lot about next semester. It's a semester after. Because molecules in your blood and your body don't last forever. They turn over very quickly. I think we talked about progesterone and how quickly progesterone turns over. It turns over in a matter of seconds sometimes. And so like chemotherapeutics where you're going in every week, is that half-life of that drug is gone. The drug's already been eliminated. It's a good question. So everything has its own half-life.
So again, IgDs, we don't really know what they do per se. They do bind to basophils and mast cells, which are immune system cells, and they do help in respiratory immune defense. We do know that, but we don't really necessarily know beyond much more than that. Again, IgGs are the most common. There's different types, and mice produce IgG1, IgG2A, IgG2B, and IgG3. Whereas we produce as humans IgG1, IgG2, IgG3, and IgG4. And if you take and you look up any of the antibody-based drugs, they will tell you which factors or which IgG subtype they are. There you can find that information.
So would this be like Privigen? Is that a name?
I don't know the answer. We should look it up.
There's another name for it, but I don't know.
Well, when we get to the end, let's look it up and see. Or over break, let's look it up. Huh? IgGAs are found again in mucus, tears, saliva. They're excellent neutralizing antibodies. You notice that IgGs basically opsonize, so that's really an important effector function for these for IgGs. IgAs do ADCC. They cannot fix, and so do IgGs. IgGs also fix complement. IgAs cannot fix complement. They don't cause inflammation, and they generally act on microbes that don't have a bunch of threats. They're resistant, so IgAs are resistant to gut proteases and low pHs, so they're very stable, and you'll find these out in the world, and the J chain is an important part of how it functions. IgGs and IgAs have these effector functions, these Fc gamma regions, that allows it to be, that tells it to be opsonized by bacteria, phagocytosis. So, oops. The J chain is on two of these antibodies. This is an IgM. This purple is the J chain. It provides stability and joining the pentamers together. The Chinese star, the ninja of antibodies. And then IgAs, this is the J chain right there. It links the two together as well, and allows it to be secreted into the mucosa. So that J chain is very, very important for that secretion effects. This chart, I'll just be straight up with you. I'm going to probably pick 2 or 3 questions out of this chart right here. It's all the stuff we've been going over, so I won't kill you with details on this, and I will tell you that I would focus on anything that has IgG related, because that's primarily what I care about, and that's primarily what you're going to care about as far as what's going on in the world. This is the chart we've been basically introduced all these different concepts today, and this chart kind of summarizes all of them. Again, so IgEs actually are protection against worms. Ironically, parasitic helminths. They're terrific at inducing ADCCs, and they induce, obviously, histamine, and they're related to, and the interesting part is, like, if you pick IgGs, they're 75% of your serum antibodies, whereas IgE is 0.05% of your serum antibodies. So just to give you an idea in comparison how much more prevalent IgGs are than IgEs. So, and here you can see that we have Fc epsilon R1 is the effector function, and that actually is what binds to this eosinophil. So if we're engineering antibodies, we can actually take the different Fc regions or just take it off completely. IgAs are here, and they have this Fc region, right? And that allows for them to be out and about in the world in the lumen. So this is the, there's one Fc receptor that has an inhibition motif, and this is an inhibitory effect, and that's this Fc gamma R2b. So that's what this shows. Okay, let's take a break, and we will come back, and I think we've talked about effector function to a great deal, and then we'll start talking about these antibodies in the bloodstream. What? It says IgA.
That's what I thought I'd seen on like the box. That's why.
Oh, it's good to know. Yeah. Good.
I don't know when I can like picture the drug in my mind, but I've just seen that. I thought that was
Well, I mean, it's talking about
What is it again? Pro.
Privigen.
Privigen. Because it's talking about reasons not to take it. And they only mention IgA. So my thought is that maybe it's an IgA. Okay. Because they're saying if you produce antibodies against IgA, you should take Privigen. So maybe that means that this is an IgA.
It's an IgG4.
It's an IgG4. How'd you find that?
I typed in Privigen isotype.
Oh, isotype. There we go.
And I think that there's something really specific with it because when we have to give it, like we have to make sure it's that brand name. So there must be like multiple because you have to like make sure it's Privigen.
Well, what's its target?
Well, so Privigen itself is proline stabilized. So maybe it has to do with the proline stabilization. I don't know if it has other biosimilars.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question. Then you want to know about the receptor dynamics?
I do. Tell me.
It hits the alpha androgenic receptors and or 5-HT receptors. So there's not a lot of receptor selectivity, which is why you get some people that don't tolerate it. Because it crosses the blood-brain barrier. It hits those and those are responsible for the weakness.
Oh, so it says treatment of Privigen might. Oh, it might not be possible if you have. Okay, never mind. Here we go. Never mind.
I just know some people come in like months for it, so they must be.
They come months before.
Or like monthly, like you see the same patient. So
So Privigen is manufactured from the plasma of large pool of healthy blood donors, and includes a broad variety of antibody specificities against common pathogens to which the donor population has been exposed. So
It's a human blood product.
it's a human blood product.
That's interesting. Are you doing a video on that?
I'm not, no.
Learn more about
So there you go. That would be your transfusion. What was the one from yesterday that we were discussing?
Oh, Truvada.
Truvada.
Truvada not. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes. Oh, it's prophylactic
It
treatment.
is, yeah. That's why I think it's really interesting. To me, this one is just really interesting. I'm taking it as a prophylaxis, so. Okay.
All right. Okay. Thanks, sweetie. Yes.
You guys all ready for the test now? Okay. I'll be late. If you have questions.
So yesterday, Amanda talked about Truvalent. You should stay here for a second. So Amanda talked about pre-exposure is trivalent for PrEP, which PrEP stands for pre-exposure prophylactics. So you take this if you think you might be exposed to HIV. It's a reverse transcriptase inhibitor. So what does that mean? So if you have a reverse transcriptase, what is that going to do?
The transcriptase, it's like, oh.
No, you're on the right track. So a transcriptase is going to take mRNA and it's going to transcript it back into DNA. That's a reverse transcriptase, right?
So normally transcription goes DNA to RNA. Reverse transcriptase goes RNA to DNA.
So if you take this drug as a reverse transcriptase inhibitor, is that going to affect anything in your body? Do we do any reverse transcriptase? No. Right? We do transcription, right? So what does reverse transcriptase? What microbes do reverse transcriptase? Or reverse transcription, I guess I should say. Yeah, viruses do reverse transcriptase. So if you take this prophylactically, you could prevent the infection because they're not able to do. Yeah, they're not able to do reverse transcription. So.
The second part is that HIV is not the only retrovirus. So this will affect any virus that uses RNA as its primary molecule instead of DNA. Those are retroviruses.
Once you're like fully infected, you can't take this.
I think it would probably knock it down. But I think that the indication for this is actually as a prophylactic. You guys know what prophylactic means? It's preventative. It's a fancy way of saying preventative. So people take this before, if they have high-risk behaviors. They've started giving this out like in some of the clinics in San Francisco where they have a bunch of people who do high-risk behaviors. The reason I say San Francisco because I heard it on one of my podcasts. They're actually giving it away as a means of getting. San Francisco's on the forefront of reducing HIV. Actually, it was on 60 Minutes, wasn't it? It was on 60 Minutes. They had a documentary on how San Francisco's on the forefront of reducing drastically the number of HIV. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know what.
I think it's a daily. Oh. Yeah, I think it's a daily.
Yeah, but if you were a high risk behavior, right? If you were doing a high risk behavior and you could actually get someone to take that, you know.
Well, what if it wasn't a high risk behavior? What if you are married to someone who had a blood transfusion before the blood system was safe, and they got HIV through no fault of their own, just through a transfusion? They're saying that this could be something that you could take to prevent transmission of HIV to the uninfected person.
You have to take it before you can't take it. Like, you can't be like, oh no, I think I'm infected, and then like have like a 24-hour period.
Good question. You should look it up and see.
Yeah. I don't know. The one thing that they do say though is if you're going to take it, you have to have an HIV test right before they give you the prescription. So they have to know that you're HIV negative when you start taking it.
Okay. I don't know. I'm not into.
I don't quite know why that would be based on its biochemical action. So, interesting. Thank you for solving the mystery. Mr. Google.
That's Dr. Google to you.
Dr. Google. Alright, see you guys all.
All right. Just as a reminder, it takes some time for antibodies to actually form. So antibodies are so after you immunize, and 2 weeks later, you're going to start seeing these responses, and that's what basically you're going to see. It's going to take some time for those antibodies to form. All right. Okay, this is the CDR region. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how this region, it's also referred to as the variable region. It's also called the complementary determining region, or CDR. It's the variable part. So now we're going to talk about the variable part very briefly, because this is the business end of what binds, right? There are a total of 12 CDR loops in a full antibody. 3 on each one of the chains. So on the light chain, there's 3. On the heavy chain, there's 3. On the other heavy chain, there's 3 more. And on the other light chain, there's another 3. They're labeled CDR 1, 2, and 3, and they're found on each one of the loops. This kind of shows a structural, a pi-mol version, and I'll show you more of this. You can see how they so there's beta sheets. The CDRs are the hypervariable region, and they're in between these beta sheets. And this is actually what binds to the antigen. So there's 12 regions. The structure is not always the same. There's not always a similar mechanism by which it binds, but this is important. This is what binds. And what are the bonds that we can bond? What are the bonds that exist that we can take 2 proteins and have them interact? There are 4 of the main ones from like week 2, maybe even week 1. Van der Waals, yes, excellent. Hydrogen, electrostatic. That would be a 5th one, right? Okay, what do we say? You said hydrogen, Van der Waals, ionic, hydrophobic, right? You can have hydrophobic pockets in there that also, but these CDRs are necessary for antigen binding. That's the main function of what they do. And they're stuck between, so even when we say the variable region, the only part that's variable is actually these loops, right? So the rest of this structure here is the same between all IgGs, for instance. Okay? So what you have here, and these loops are between 10 and 19 residues long. So there's 12 regions on each antibody that are 10 to 19 residues that are different. Okay? And this kind of gives you an idea of how that, and this is what's called the paratope. Adam made a nice little video. So this is a FAB, talk about what that is in a minute. And he's showing you where this is kind of a structure and how the CDR1 of each, a heavy and light, so this dark is the heavy. CDR2 is in green, right? So that's the loop region right through there. CDR3 is right there. And that's how then they form a structure, right? I told you structure equals function 105 times. Immune system is either good or bad. There's certain things that I'll tell you 500 times that you hopefully get through. And you can see how that's crazy, isn't it? All these functional groups are sticking out in different ways. And that's right in there, exactly what happens in those CDR regions. And what happens then is if you get high affinity, that antigen sits right in those antigen binding sites really tightly. And if you have low binding, they don't fit in there as tightly. Oh, it does not look good. To make these, I think it's really important that you have an exposure to what I've actually made dozens of antibodies in my time for my PhD. I think I've told you we did prion diseases, right? So we took prion protein and made antibodies against prion protein. And I think I told you at one point there was a Nobel Prize that was awarded in this space. So what you do is you inject your protein into a mouse. They use mouse, goats, rabbits, chickens, llamas. I mean, any animal that you can think of, they're probably injecting in. Llamas are the big one right now. Although we've worked with some chicken people. The chicken people are getting pretty popular too. We also have artificial ways of making them. I talked to the guy from Abcam. He's got a completely artificial way. When I say artificial, synthetic, like he does everything in the computer. And he makes computer-based antibodies. So he's got some pretty ridiculous ideas. So you isolate the B cells. Okay, we talked a lot about B cells. Antibodies are made by B cells. You should have 10 to the 9 B cells. But if the antigen is present, you'll have a whole bunch of cells that are B cells. And then we fuse them with a myeloma fusion partner. What's myeloma? Multiple myeloma? It's a cancer.
Oh, is it?
Yes. It's a B cell cancer. Okay? Myeloma is a B cell cancer. What is the property of the cancer? Uncontrolled growth, which is good. Do we want that? Yeah. They're also immortal. They don't die. So you shut off the mechanism of dying, and you shut off the regulation of your cell cycle. So they're just going to sit there and produce and produce and produce and produce. So you fuse these cells, and what you end up is with cells that are producing the antibody that live forever, and they produce a lot of them, and they reproduce real fast. Right? That's good. So we're making a whole bunch of. Then we isolate them, each cell into one well. So you'll see antibodies named all kinds of crazy things. Usually, you'll see them named after the cell that they the well that they were put into. So this is a plate, and they're labeled by alphabetically A through G, and 1 through 12. So you'll see them named like H12 is the antibody. So we have antibodies D, D6, E317, all these weird names. And that's basically what well they took that out of, depending on how you're numbering these plates. We isolate those cells, we produce the antibodies, we screen for specificity even more, and then we take those cells and we just grow them up, and we make a library, and we just keep harvesting off that media. Nowadays, this is what won the Nobel Prize in the 70s. Nowadays, what we do is we go through with this cloning step. We sequence the CDR regions, right? We clone them, and sequence them, and then we know the sequence of the CDR regions, and then we just put them into a construct. We don't even mess with all of this stuff anymore. This whole process can take months. If we just do this process, we can have it down to weeks. So you can make a drug candidate in weeks based on antibody production. Pharmaceutical antibodies is the largest growing segment of the biopharmaceutical market. In fact, it's the largest growing in the pharmaceutical market. It's 14 billion in sales in 2005. It's expected to grow to 30 billion by 2010. This is a little bit older slide. It's the largest. 7 of the top 10 drugs are antibodies, and you probably are familiar. You've probably all seen them on TV. Humira, Remicade. 500-based antibody therapies are currently under development. That's probably doubled or tripled by the time from this slide. I'm introducing this to you. There is a nomenclature, just like you have your trade name. You also have its chemical name. Antibodies are no different. This gives you an idea of what they are. So if there's a variable, it tells you what the indication is. It tells you what the host is. So the suffix will always be mab. So if you see abciximab, you know as the chemical name, you know that it's an antibody, right? And you can tell based on what this letter is, what the source is. There's a website on Wikipedia that has all of the every day they're adding new stuff. This one's a little bit older. Every day they're adding. And this is a little bit old. They've kind of backed off from this, but this definitely is true. You can go figure out exactly exactly about what that antibody does generically by this nomenclature. So the important part is there is a nomenclature for naming these that exists. So I'm sitting at home, right? I don't know if you watch Netflix or Hulu, right? They'll have, well, not Netflix, but Hulu. Watching Hulu, and they'll have drug commercials on. They'll be like, oh, this is. And I'm looking at the trade name. And I'm like, okay, that's this, and that's this, and that's this. It's a rat antibody, and so I try to sit down and figure out what it is. It's kind of a. Yep, adalimumab. Yep. It is kind of cool.
Are there any other big ones that have names like
All
Then Humira.
all of them have a trade name, Humira. Adalimumab is the chemical name, or whatever name. No, it's and all of them have those kind of names. So you should be able to look at that and look at a chart. If you're good, you can look at it and go, oh, XI stands for Chimera. Most of them now just have the U because most of them are human. Some of the old ones were mouse, and you can see humanized on some of them. So 15, 20 years ago, all antibodies or all antibody-based drugs, immunotherapies, were murine. We started then making chimera proteins. This is where we take and only the variable region was mouse, the rest was humanized. Then we started making just the CDR regions, right? And now we have a complete. They have mice that have a complete human immune system. They're called OmniMouse, OmniRat. We have OmniChickens. And if I'm going to make antibodies, I can inject that in, and you will get a fully humanized antibody from a mouse. Why do we use mice anyway? What does the immune system have to have in order for it to make antibodies? Okay, I do like that. That's a good answer. B cells. It has to be foreign, right? The protein has to be foreign. So I can't put in TNF alpha into me or you and get a therapy out of it because your body's just going, oh yeah, that's it every day, right? If I put a humanized if I put the human immune system into a mouse and I put in TNF alpha from a human, what's it going to do? It's going to go, oh, that's not normal, right? I need to make an antibody against that, right? My immune system is now completely humanized, so it's completely fine. We do a lot of stuff in mice, but you can imagine things that would be way better, like a chicken. You think a chicken has TNF alpha? No. So that's why chicken is very popular right now, because chicken antibody or chicken, and they humanize chickens too. So they make human antibodies. There's some pretty crazy crap that goes on that we've done genetically in order to make antibodies. Now, the other thing is that some of these sources are not as effective at making antibodies. So if you take an Omni mouse, it's not as effective as making. And the effectiveness of that is going away because now what do? We just sequence the whole thing and we can just put it in and we can make it recombinantly. Here's rituximab, which it's against CD8 or CD20, which is a B cell antigen. Why would we want to make something that has a B cell antigen on it? If we want to knock down B cells, right? So if your immune system is acting up, you can use this as a, it's been approved for B cell lymphoma, right, which is a cancer of the B cells, right, B cell lymphoma. So you can give this rituximab. It was actually is pretty effective in attacking that. Here's an example of the naming thing. Trastuzumab, right, UZ, right? What does the U mean? So it's human. ZU means it's humanized, right? So there's your trastuzumab, Herceptin. So breast cancer. So HER2 positive breast cancer, which accounts for like 5 to 10% of breast cancers, HER2 is overexpressed. So you can use this as a drug. This Herceptin acts as a drug, and it binds to HER2 breast cancer cells. I find this very ironic. This is actually a cell. It looks like a breast. I looked at that and I was like, this is weird. But you could have made that a little different so it didn't look. But so they have HER2 receptors on there. Herceptin comes in and binds those. That allows your immune system then to stop and take care of those cancerous cells. This is kind of a unique one. This is actually a trafficking molecule. So this is gemtuzumab, which is a Mylotarg. This is actually an antibody. I wish Amanda was here. I don't know if she knows about this. I should actually have to talk about this with her later. So here's the antibody, and this is not to scale, all right? Because this molecule is probably 100 times bigger than this, right? So this is an antibody. This is like about 100 kilodaltons, so it's absolutely enormous. And then this is a small molecule there's a linker in here to this drug, right? And this binds into the DNA minor groove. So this antibody actually targets, right? So this is an antibody drug conjugate. So we take a normal drug, when we conjugate it to an antibody, what is the antibody going to do? It's going to bind to something, it's going to deliver it to a specific site, and then what ends up happening, so the antibody is to CD33, and this is a cytotoxic agent. So we're targeting this to a cancer cell, right, with this antibody, CD33, and then this is a cytotoxin. So we take and we're delivering a cytotoxic agent to a cell. This is used to treat acute myelogenous leukemia. So, and there's this linker here, cleaves when it gets into an acidic environment, which is commonly found in cancer cells in a tumor. Cancer cells are very acidic because they've overproduced all their metabolites, which are commonly very, very acidic. So this is some of the ways we're using antibodies as therapeutics. Yeah. Here's rheumatoid arthritis. There's a drug, infliximab. So what is XI? I think that's the Chimera one, but we should look and see. I don't remember. I think it's Chimera. Yeah, it's Chimera. The mouse one is O. So infliximab, right? And I think if you look at that chart, that LI, right? Infliximab is immune. So you can kind of tell that it's an immune response. So infliximab binds TNF alpha trimers. This is actually, does anyone know what this is? This is Remicade. So TNF alpha is used for TNF alpha is an inflammatory response agent. It increases your inflammation. So you can use this for any number of things. I think psoriasis is one of the one. Okay, you guys probably know better than I do. I mean, I remember seeing plaque psoriasis on TV. That's what my remembrance of this is. But TNF alpha is a very common, everything from Crohn's disease to psoriasis to any number of things. We're just treating. Here's Humira, right? Same indications. It's a TNF alpha inhibitor. This is actually the #1 by revenue drug by sales. It's the top selling drug by sales. Humira. Adalimumab, LI is what? Immune. MU is actually MU. It's a good question. I don't know actually. Oh, you're right. It's just U, so it's human. Okay, I thought it was actually mouse, but it's LIM would be immune. So what are you going to see going forward? What's the business end of an antibody? You'll probably see this in Amanda's course. I think Stefan teaches this component. You'll see this over the entire semester, or over half a semester, I should say. I think this is where I find this absolutely fascinating. We have different SCFPs are just the business end of the antibody, the CDR regions, the variable regions, I should say. Diabodies are actually linked SCFPs. We have triabodies, which are 3 SCFPs linked together. Tetrabodies, mini-bodies, which are very basically the same VL domain put in and linked together just via linkers. We have camel IgGs, which are just basically heavy chains, right? You have your heavy chain here. We have, I don't even know what that is, to be honest with you. I've never even saw that. I've seen that one before. An AR domain. We have IgGs, Fabs are just this end right here. Fab2s, they create a linker between two Fabs in order to get the multivalency effect. Then we have this is a bispecific, so these are two different regions. We also have trispecific antibodies that they just made a trispecific antibody against HIV. That was very, very effective. What's the moral of this story? Why am I showing you all this? And why didn't I spend all the time to figure out each one of these individually? Why do I not know about IG and AR? Any guesses? Here's what I'll tell you. Pfizer has their own little construct. GSK has their own little construct. J&J has their own little construct. VI has everybody has a little construct that they've made with these antibodies that they think is the next way, that's the greatest thing. They're not the same. They're all different. Everybody has their own little theories on what's better. Diabodies, nanobodies, SCFEs, bispecific, mini-body, tetrabodies, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is just a couple, right? Examples of what you're seeing with anything that you can imagine, they're doing with these things. They're trying to make a cell, they've got pentabodies, biovalent nanobodies coated with nanoparticles, fluorescent protein tags with nanobodies, chromogenic enzyme fusion nanobodies. Anything that you can imagine, we are generating and using antibodies and taking that technology on the end of the antibody and putting it in different constructs in order to make different drugs out of it. Okay? It's absolutely crazy what this technology is allowing us to do. Some people even just take out, Amanda and I have discussed just taking out the CDR regions and making those into peptides and seeing if they bind to as a blocking agent, right? Because what's the disadvantage of antibody-based drugs? Here's a camel, nanobodies. This is the rage right now. I told you, and all it is the heavy chain. There's no light chain on there, it's just the variable heavy chain. So people inject camels with antigens in order to get. You will see some drugs out of this. I see this every single time I review for the NIH, and I have discussions with this. They want to make all kinds of synthetic libraries out of camels. They're actually the rage a few years ago, and it's starting to tone down a little bit. But so I asked you a question, but I don't remember what it was. Do you? Well, why would you use a camel? It's different, right? It is different, right? And it's simple, right? There's not a lot of complexity there. So if I can make it, I can synthetically make it a little bit better. They're talking about, so interestingly enough, oh, I know what the question I was asking you too. So nanobodies are also resistant to pH. Why would that be? And heat. Why would that be important? Or why could that be important? Yes. So there's two reasons that's important. Okay. Why don't they give pills for antibodies? Your gut is too acidic. So how do they give antibody-based drugs? Yes, infusions or transfusions, right? This is where, as pharmacists, you probably need to start thinking about what that means for you, right? Because if a lot of the new drugs are antibody-based, then you have to give infusions. I would probably consider doing a residency in that technology because that's going to be a significant, and actually it's a very interesting part of what's going on. But if the pharmacist can make drugs that are heat resistant and pH resistant, now all of a sudden I can make pills out of antibodies. And why is that better? Patient doesn't have to come in, yeah.
pharmacist too, so.
I don't. Do you know?
The residency is like after school, you do an additional year.
Yeah, but like what additional stuff would you learn from that? Because
Do like studies or like they do assignments. Like at Stanford, they just you have different things you look into. Where an internship, you're not gonna really like.
It's kind of like the same thing like when doctors get done after school. You have to
Like
like Grey's Anatomy.
yeah, but that's like showing them their job. Like you want your job.
I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to your question. How's that for an answer? I would ask your. Don't you guys have an advisor? I ask Adam these questions all the time. So
Can you make like IV bags as an intern?
Yep. They do at Stanford. An intern does exactly what a pharmacy tech does.
okay. So if I can make all of a sudden, if I can make pills out of antibodies, that's a big deal. You can compliance is going to go up. I don't have cold chain storage anymore. I don't have a lot of things that are really, really important. So CAR T. This is the. I find this entire lecture fascinating. I find it. The reason you guys are probably brain drained is because it's a lot of crap, right? And I completely understand and acknowledge this. This is really just an introductory to a lot of the new drug design. That's why I find it really interesting. So CAR T is one of the next generations in oncology treatments. So some of the first ones have just been approved. It's booming. There's 240 clinical trials with CAR T cells. Okay. Basically, what it means is chimeric antigen receptor on T cells. So we take T cells out of the body, and what we do is we take the variable heavy and variable light chains, and we infuse them onto a T cell receptor from an antibody. So we take an antibody and a TCR complex, and we fuse them together in order to attack a specific cancer cell. So you're basically programming your T cells to attack specific cancer cells. So I pull all the T cells out of my body, cytotoxic T cells, CD8 positive. I fuse on an anti-TAA variable domains onto the TCR complex, and all of a sudden now that T cell will attack cancer cells. Okay, that's the general theory about what we're doing. This just kind of shows it in a different way. First, we make the construct. Second, we clone it in. We transduce and we put that in ex vivo, meaning I pull out. Ex vivo means I take the T cells out of the patient, I clone it back in, and then I put that back in. We infuse the transduced T cells, and this T cell is then going to attack that tumor cell on that receptor. TAA positive tumor cells. That's a receptor on tumor cells. TAA is overexpressed in cancer cells. We're on the third generation, okay? And you'll see I don't know, look, I don't understand this any better than you do. Today was the first day that I actually understood what CAR T was. The reason I actually gave this lecture is because I was really intrigued by this concept. I've heard a lot about it, and I think it's around what I do. I'm around in the VH and the VL all the time, but we're in the third generation now, so we're taking scFvs, right, which is the variable part of an antibody, and we're plugging different ones in to this, and we're adding different linkers in or signaling mechanisms into this in order for it to be more effective. We've armorized it, CAR T cells, to make them to withstand some of the attacks that they're going to face from our immune system. So they're definitely getting to be better and better and better at this. And I think, personally, it'd be very fascinating if you guys could actually do this as pharmacists. It is a treatment option, and I don't know if you guys can do that now, but I think it'd be very fascinating, because this is one of the ways. This is probably one of the most promising cancer. let's just put it this way. If anyone in my family, if I knew had cancer, and that's going to happen, the first thing I would look up is if there's a clinical trial with CAR T cells in it, because this is one of the most besides the checkpoint inhibitors, which I didn't talk about at all, but from a cancer perspective, the checkpoint inhibitors are targets. PD-1 and PD-L1 are cancer targets. Besides those, I would be very intrigued to see if I could figure out if I could get into a CAR T clinical trial. Any questions? I'm sorry to throw so much at you. I probably should do this over multiple lectures, but this semester is so crazy. There's no way that you can do all this. And personally, if I was sitting in your shoes, this probably is one of what I'm talking about is the cutting edge of drug discovery right now. And you guys don't necessarily live on that edge. You guys live in the day-to-day, but you'll see this in 10 years. A lot of these technologies in 10 years. So they'll become a mainstay in what you're doing. All right, you guys can give vaccines, right? So let me give you a little brief primer in the next 20 minutes on vaccines. It's basically what we've been telling you. There's not much new to a vaccine, right? Does anyone want to describe a vaccine? Yes. Yes. So we take some kind of antigen and I inject it into your body, and that's going to then allow your immune system to do what? Yeah, it's gonna recognize it. So what two responses should you see? Yes, which is a B cell or humoral response. You have B cells and you have T cells. So you could also get a T cell response, right? Bless you. So primarily, I told you yesterday, vaccines. Here's some examples of the effectiveness. Whooping cough. We're down. We saw an 87% decrease in whooping. This is in Canada, so because the Canadians actually care about vaccines. Measles, we're down 99%. We almost eliminated some of these diseases like rubella. There was one case in Canada. Diphtheria, one case. Polio is almost completely eradicated. I say almost. We almost eradicated polio. Huh? Yeah, we had a recent polio outbreak. It makes me absolutely furious because we can solve these problems. But people die from these diseases. I had someone argue with me, so I'm a Facebook warrior on this topic, right? I go ballistic. There's a couple of them that I go crazy over, and this is the number one.
Do you think they even listen though?
No, they don't.
Yelling at
I'm like, hey, I'm an expert in vaccines. I do this for a living. I'm telling you, there's a problem. Oh no, my gut tells me, my mom instinct, blah blah blah. Well, F you, because people die. If I knew you better, I'd say it. F you, really. I mean, seriously, people die because of your stupidity. You know? You name it. There's people who say it causes autism, any number of health effects. They make up these batshit crazy ideas, and they believe them. These people believe them, and that just is absolutely stunning to me. It'd be like me going to I tell this analogy. It'd be like me going to the auto mechanic, 100 auto mechanics, and they say, "Oh, your brakes, it's your brakes." And there's 3 whack job guys who try to rip me off, and I go to them and they say, "Oh, your fuel pump's bad." And I go, "Oh, okay, it's my fuel pump." Even though 97 people have told me it's my brakes, I'm going to believe it's the guy who says it's my fuel pump. Right? The 3 crazy whack job guys are trying to rip me off. That's exactly what it's like, because there's not any of us in vaccinology. Hey, I'll be the first to admit, we still don't know a lot about what's going on. But I can tell you, for these simple cases, it is not rocket science. We just do it, and they get it, and we're done. And they're better off. Okay? People die. People die. And that's why I go crazy about it. People will die from these diseases. And there's no reason whatsoever. And there are people who can't get vaccinated. And I talk about this at the end. I'll talk about it now. But we have to have a certain level of immunity that's built up in the population in order for it to be effective. So if you're just choosing not to, you're an asshole. That's exactly what you are. Because people are gonna be getting these diseases from this, and I don't know the answer, right? Me sitting up here ranting and raving is not effective against anti-vaxxers, right? You guys are probably a lot more nice about it than I am, but it drives me bonkers because I can't. It's unfathomable to me that people in the modern era can look at science and just say, "Oh, my gut tells me," whatever, right? And these are people I've known since I was a kid, like people that moms of people that I grew up playing with that tell me, no, well, I know Jimmy down the street. He got autism from vaccines. Well, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Or we give too many vaccines. Really? I'm going to promise you that if you go eat a mouthful of dirt, the number of antigens that you're going to eat in that dirt is 100,000 times more than what you're going to get in the vaccine. This idea that we have to carry over, your immune system is designed to handle a load. It is.
Prove it though that they didn't get autism.
They can't. No, they can't.
Yeah, that's the.
It is a problem, right? I mean, we've got tons and tons of studies, right? And the other problem is, here's the other problem, right? I mean, you probably all know this statistic, right? You probably all understand herd immunity. There are hazards to vaccinations, okay? And this is where statistics and understanding of what happens is important. There are people who have bad reactions to vaccines for whatever reason. All of our immune systems are different, right? And I don't want to minimize what that is. Okay, you're going to be giving a vaccine, and someone's going to have a bad reaction to it, right? You know, the idea that people tell me all the time, right? Well, the people who are giving the vaccines, well, you're not going to get the flu from this. Well, I can just tell you, I feel like crap the day after I get the flu vaccine. I don't know what it is, right? I just know that I feel like crap. And sometimes I even probably consider myself getting a minor case of the flu, even though I know rationally that's not the case. But these things are problems for you because you're the one who are on the front lines, right? And people are going to perceive that as, well, I got the flu from the flu vaccine. Well, no, you didn't, but it's hard to argue with that, right? It's hard to argue with that. And the news will show this crying mom on TV. I've seen this on the news. I went ballistic on these people. I called the news and I'm like, you cannot do this. Because what does it happen? So in Japan, right, the HPV vaccine, right? What's the name of that vaccine? Gardasil. Yeah, so the Gardasil vaccine, that on the news they showed the crazy, one of the 6 things that adverse events that can happen by taking it. They showed that on the news. Compliance went down to almost nothing. Well, guess what happens when people get HPV? Cancer, right? You get cancer if you don't get a vaccine. You can actually quantify how many people will die from each vaccine when we don't solve this problem. So there's 13,000 people. I'm making this number up, but it's something like 13,000 people a year will die in the future because somebody on the news said they showed a crying mom because of an adverse event. Hey, look, I'm very sympathetic to that, right? But there's going to be 13,000 moms who are going to be crying over their kid over the one. And the math does not justify it. I completely understand. If it's your kid who has that adverse event, that's a tragedy. That is a tragedy. And I don't want to minimize that at all because, frankly, I don't know what I would do if I lost one of my kids to an adverse event, right? But they happen, right? You can have faulty techniques. You can have a hypersensitivity reaction, right? We all know, we just went through the type of hypersensitivity. You can have a hypersensitivity reaction that can be fatal or significantly problematic, cause significant morbidity. Okay, there are neurological involvements. There's an anemia event that can occur from this, a hemolytic anemia that can cause drastic effects. These things happen. Okay, we know what the numbers are, right? It's 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000 people have these problems. Bottom line is, that's not a good justification for you not getting those vaccines, okay? Or people not getting those vaccines. That's the hazards of immunization. They're real. All right. Let's just quickly go through types of vaccines. I think we went over some of it yesterday. There's live attenuated, where the virus is still live, or the bacteria is still live. There's an oral polio vaccine that's still live. Measles, rotavirus, yellow fever, tuberculosis, they're still live, but we attenuate them so they have none of the effects that you're going to see. Okay? There should be no no effects. Inactivated, basically we kill them. Sometimes we kill them with formaldehyde. Sometimes they're heat inactivated. There's all the whole cell pertussis inactivated polio vaccine. Sometimes there's any number of ways you can kill the virus or the bacteria, and then we inject that into you as a vaccine. Subunit, so we take it, we can purify an antigen. So so I work with herpes. We took GD, which is one of the glycoproteins. I'm probably sick of hearing me say this. We put that as a vaccine again in 3,000 women as a vaccine against herpes virus. So we just take one of the proteins that herpes makes and you can put it in. It's called a subunit vaccine. You purify that antigen. You can either do it recombinantly, meaning I synthetically make it in another organism that I inject it in. I can make it in bacteria. I can make it in yeast. I can make it in any number of these other hosts, or I can purify it out of something through an egg, through eggs or any number of things. Or I can do inactivated toxins. So diphtheria and your tetanus fall into these categories. So there's all different kinds of ways we can attack and use attack this by using vaccines. Again, live is some live vaccinations, variola, smallpox. Jess, my daughter, I don't know, have you guys ever met Jess? She's here. She had smallpox vaccines. If you're in the military, you get smallpox vaccines. You get this nice little corpuscle thing that grows on. There's a term for it. I don't remember what the term is, but they inject you with live smallpox. Yeah, and it can cause problems, but it's live. So it's live attenuant, so it's avirulent. Here are some of the people that should not be exposed to it. People with leukemia, other malignancies, if they're receiving corticosteroids. There's your house argument. Corticosteroids, right? You're not going to give someone a vaccine if you decrease their immune system. Radiation, or if they're pregnant. So these are things that again, this is a virulent pathogen that has been attenuated. So it does not have effects. We can kill them. So kill the viruses or kill the bacteria. Toxoids, as I mentioned before, those are your diphtheria and your botulism toxin. We can also do cellular fractionations, so we can from purified. So there's trade-offs, right? Live attenuated is often more effective. So everything in your world is safety and efficacy. Safety and efficacy. Safety, can I give it to people safely without side effects? Efficacy doesn't work. Everything in your world, everything in the FDA's world is safety and efficacy. So, trade-offs. Live and attenuated, much more efficacious, but what do they have? Safety, higher safety risks. Subunit vaccines, better safety, less efficacy. So sometimes we do trade-offs. Everything in vaccine world is trade-off and statistics. It's epidemiology. It's a great question. I like the thought process. The answer to your question is very dependent on the virus. How's that for an answer? I would say this gut reaction, probably. And it would be a hypothesis worth testing. But the immune system is a very complex thing. If it was simple, we would already have vaccines against a large number of viruses that we see. We can also do surface antigen. These are recombinant. Again, I think I told you about herpes. And here's a list of the common vaccines. And we're making new vaccines all the time. There are cancer vaccines directly for straight up some cancers. And we are making progress in this area. There are so many different types of viruses out there. And there's so many, some of the technologies. So I listened to, when I was back at the NIH last week? It's been last week. RSV, you guys are all probably familiar with RSV. That's the respiratory virus that kids get. I listened to an insane amount of discussion about how to develop a vaccine against RSV. And we're actually making progress in that space, even though for years we've had a lot of trouble with it. You can give this a lot of different ways, and there's different efficacies based on how you give that, right? You can imagine that. So if I'm going to, probably one of the best ways is we do eye IM injections or sub-Q. Intramuscular, IM, subcutaneous, sub-Q. So you can do different kinds of infection, different ways of doing it. Deep subcutaneous or intramuscular route, that's most vaccines. This is the part where most moms, you've probably seen cute YouTube videos with the doctor doing a little, touching all over the body and they give them a quick prick, right? Just boom type thing. That's what that is. That's traditional in the arm. Your butt hurts for a week. Arm hurts for a week. Whatever. That's what this is. Oral route. This is an oral vaccine. There's far less common. Intradermal route. They have patches with microneedles on them that you can pop on, and they do that. Scarification. That's where they take and they scar. They cut your arm basically. Yeah, it's so it's pretty brutal. And some of the new ones are intranasal. Right, so you have spots that you shoot up inside your nose. That one kind of befuddles me a little bit, but almost all vaccines, you have a primary vaccine and then you have a booster, right? And some even have two boosters. So we're developing a vaccine for herpes where we're talking about having 3 and 4 boosters because we need to understand what the immune system is doing, and we'll have different immune or different antigens based on how you respond to the first one. So we're talking about making smart vaccines. We're profiled and personalized. So if I give you one, you're going to generate an antibody against different epitopes on that antigen. And I could give you a second vaccine. I profile you and see what antigen, bless you, depending on what epitopes you get coverage for, I can give you a different vaccine that will give different epitopes that may improve the efficacy of the vaccine. So those are some of the ideas that we're talking about doing, but almost all vaccines have a primary and all of them have a booster based on what we talked about, what happens when you get exposed to an antigen. So the other important concepts are period of how long. So you probably are all familiar with this. You have to go get a booster after 7 years for tetanus. That's what I always end up having to do, right? I step on a nail and I'm like, has it been 7 years since I have to go get the tetanus shot, right? I know. It just makes you feel good, right? I get it. So here's another example of that same thing. You're absolutely right. So you take your dog to the kennel, and they're like, you don't have the Bordetella vaccine, so you go to the vet and get that, right? So you go to the vet, you get that, you take them there. Well, guess what? Your animal is not going to be immunized against Bordetella in that 15-minute period or even that 2-day period, right? It's really about, a couple weeks, right? So we kind of fudge things a little bit. Because the probability, we're playing statistics games, right? Probability that animal getting infected again, or you stepping on, so all these things, we have short periods. Some like cholera vaccines are only months. Some are 2-year boosters, some are 3 to 5. And some are just forever, like measles, MMR, and rubella. Those just go on forever, and you're fine. Some are 10 years yellow fever vaccine. And there's some vaccines actually cause some of the Zika family viruses, which are yellow fever, dengue fever, some of those viruses. You can actually get, like if you get a yellow fever vaccine, it can actually cause dengue to be more virulent based on the response. So there's all kinds of things that can happen in this. There's different levels of effectiveness, and that's based on the people and on the. So some are absolutely protective. The yellow fever is 100%, almost like MMR, 99%, highly protective. Polio, hepatitis B, and you notice that polio is almost completely eradicated, even though its efficacy is only 80 to 95%. Then you have moderately protective. And why the question today is, why do you get an influenza vaccine, or why do they make you get an influenza vaccine? If it's all, and 40 sometimes is very, very generous. Sometimes it's less than that. Yes, because how many people die from the flu every year? 50,000 people a year die from the flu. And it's not you and me. Who is it? It's your grandma, and it's the babies who die. Every single 50,000 people a year die from flu. If you don't think it's important to get the flu vaccine, huh? No, it is. 50,000 people a year die from flu. Look it up. 50,000? 50,000 people. There's 300 million people in the United States. 330 million people in the United States. No, in the United States, 50,000 people die. No, 50,000 people in the United States die from flu every single year. It's a big problem. And there's a reason as healthcare people, you're going to have to get the flu shot every single year. Because it's not for you, it's for that grandma that you see while doing your rounds who dies in the hospital because you were carrying the flu. Who knows, right? Who knows, right? Maybe she, maybe you got the flu by giving her the bottle, and she the next day.
Why are you so against vaccines?
I appreciate your skepticism. But I want you to go look it up and see, because it's at 40 to 60% effective. The reason that we tolerate it being so low is because people die from it, and we wouldn't make that public health decision if people didn't die from it. Yeah.
But people who are doing cancer treatments or stuff like that, they can't get that because of their immune system, right?
Right.
So it helps to protect all them.
It helps to prevent all these people who have trouble. It does. I'm just gonna. I'll just give you. I'll give you one more, just fervent plea. Because you are healthcare professionals, you have to believe in the science. You have to believe in the science. It's not a choice. You are morally irresponsible if you do not believe in the science. Think about that. Why? Because people die. People get sick. It costs people money. People go bankrupt from decisions, right? Your job is to protect these people. That's the end of it, right? That's the end of it. There is no other, right? Your job is to help them, right? There is no other discussion point. The science says that. Is it perfect? No, it's not. I'll be the first to stand up here and tell you there's problems. But the fact of the matter is that it saves a lot more people than it hurts. Number two, in the amount of people who have been saved. Clean water is the only thing that's more. Only thing. Even antibiotics. Put that in your spike. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. It's the truth. Okay, and I will go to all extremes to help people understand how important this is, because people die. So, all right, enough ranting and raving for the day. I appreciate you tolerating me and my rants. Tomorrow's a big day. If you have any questions, Amanda's available from tonight. She's a night person. I'm a morning person. If you want to get hold of me in the morning, I'll be happy to help you out. So.